So there's some big news coming out of Square Enix right now. Apparently, they're now addressing their terrible sales data from 2023 and 2022, I believe. And their approach now is going to be twofold, two big things that are worth noting. One is that apparently for the next Nintendo console, they're going to be aggressively, in their words, porting things to this console. I think that's a brilliant idea. I think that Nintendo and Square Enix, they mesh really, really well. I think that Nintendo hardcore fans see a lot of good in the mainline Square Enix titles. I think one of the big problems that has been in the past is that they dipped their toe a lot. So we got like Crystal Chronicle games and all this other stuff, but we never got like the mainline stuff like Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 and Final Fantasy X and all that stuff back when it was like the Nintendo Wii, when they could have really capitalized on that massive install base. And you know, there was a lot of money that they left on the table back then. Not putting stuff on the Wii U makes more sense, but now that the Switch is a thing and you know we have Kingdom Hearts now, I mean, you've seen what it is though. It's those cloud-based ports which are abysmal. It doesn't really even count as having Kingdom Hearts on the Nintendo Switch in my opinion. So I hope that if they do, you know, aggressively put games on the Nintendo Switch too, that of course it's the new titles that we want to see, as well as real ports of Kingdom Hearts and past Final Fantasy titles outside of, you know, the main 6, 7, 8, and 9. You know, not the classic stuff. I'm talking about really recent stuff like Final Fantasy 15 and 16 and all that. That would do a lot of work. Now, the other thing that's really concerning is that Square Enix seems to be doubling down as well about something they said back in January, and I'm going to read it directly so I don't get this wrong here. It says that developing a wide variety of titles has resulted in splintering our resource pool. And while the solution seems to be to focus on AAA games and indie games, any games that fall in the middle of that, they want to not put their resources into. And that is frightening to me because I think that a lot of the games that Square Enix has been putting out recently have been really great, and I think that the best titles that they've been putting out recently are the ones that kind of fit that descriptor. I'm thinking of games like Live Alive and Star Ocean 2 and things of that ilk, and I would love to see a Chrono Trigger remake at some point in time. And if Square Enix is not putting the resources into projects like that, then there's going to be problems. And similarly, I want to see more remakes in the future, like for Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI, and if they're not going to be making projects like this anymore, then you're not going to see games like that anymore. I'm trying to think of other ones as well, like Bravely Default might just become Bravely Defunct. We're probably not going to see that anymore. Like that stinks because, again, Final Fantasy 16 is great and all. You know, Final Fantasy 7 Remake and Rebirth are also pretty good. But like for me, the things that I've been the most interested in are those games that fall into that nice center. And I really hope that they fall into indie category and not somewhere like maybe Forspoken is somewhere in the middle. And if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, it would be wise business wise, and also to the rest of us who just don't care about games like Forspoken, if resources aren't put into something like that. But again, I really would love to see a Chrono Trigger remake. I would love to see it honestly like in that mid-range. I would like to see it have like the Dragon Quest XI engine, but I would also settle for a HD 2D remake. All I'm saying though is that based off of what we're reading here, the chances of that in the future become much murkier, and it makes me concerned as a somewhat Square Enix fan. Well, anyways, with that all said though, the news about having their games put on Nintendo, awesome, would love to see it. I frankly like to play most of my games on Nintendo consoles, so that's going to work out great for me. But again, consolidating resources for very large or very small projects has me a bit concerned, and we're just going to have to wait for the future to see what kind of projects they meant by that. But again, fingers crossed that it's going to be okay. Whoa, I guess we're going to do an update to this video. Literally this morning, the president of Square Enix has come public to say that he bemoans the sales figures for 2023 and 2024, and that he's very worried about it. Basically, there was a 16% drop in net sales, which is a record low for the company. So they're very kind of shook up over there, apparently. And so I'm just going to go over what games failed and why they might have failed, and also what they could be doing better. Okay, there was Forspoken, which is a game that like looks like it's pretty well produced, but it just it did not have its ear to the ground in terms of what people are actually looking for with games these days. The best way I can describe Forspoken is that somebody like read a text manual on what's going on with online culture these days and tried to make a video game for that. And I think that, you know, lines like oh, did I just do that?
Did I just do that?
Well, definitely with my assistance.
I did not just do that.
We did.
Is really tiresome for a lot of people now, as far as what they're looking for with their entertainment. And I guess reviews also came in that the gameplay wasn't the best. So if you were unconvinced before, you may have been completely convinced now not to pick up the game because you've been reading reviews that the gameplay wasn't the best. So that was probably a very expensive game to make, looking at the graphics and also just the scope of the story and everything. That probably sunk a lot of dollars when you consider the fact that not many people bought it. The other game that recently came out that was a complete disaster was Foam Stars, a Splatoon inspired game is the nice way I'll put it. And I'm really surprised that Square Enix even greenlit this game at all. But as you can tell by the quality, probably the footage that is on the screen right now, it is not a game that is going to excite anybody. I don't think that anybody really wanted to even give this game a chance because they have Splatoon as that alternative. And then people that don't own a Nintendo Switch probably aren't looking for a game like Foam Stars, if we're being honest. They're probably going to play Fortnite if they even fall into that demographic. Those are the two big games, the two big flops. And then here's the surprising one that was mentioned in the article. Final Fantasy Rebirth was also a financial flop, or just didn't meet sales expectations for the company. And we already went over this in a prior video, but I don't mind talking about it again because my audience is small and ever growing. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has a couple of things going against it. One was that it's a direct sequel to a game. When you want new people to come in, they're not going to jump into the second part of a 3-part story. They need to play the previous part, and that alone can intimidate somebody enough to not want to buy the game. The other big aspects that people don't like talking about, but I mean, it's a conversation that I feel like that needs to be had. There's a lot of people that know now that this is a stealth sequel game. It is not an actual remake of Final Fantasy VII. In my opinion, the way I would describe it, it's sort of like a theme park ride through Final Fantasy VII with a different story. And so there's a lot of people like myself that don't like that idea, and it's okay to do something like that, but you know, the fact that you don't have an actual remake to Final Fantasy VII is a major drawback. It's something that is going to cause people to not want to buy the game. So I think that a real authentic Final Fantasy VII remake would have sold way more than an alternate timeline story Final Fantasy VII game. And I think that we're seeing the results of that now. The gameplay is amazing though, but even still, you know, even with the gameplay being really good for what it is, like exceptionally good for what it is, I think there's a lot of people that also played the original Final Fantasy VII that wanted the gameplay to be relatively the same, and those people were lost years and years and years ago. And when you couple a whole bunch of demographics that have one reason or another not to pick up Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you have a game that falls far below sales expectations, which is a shame because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a well-crafted game. I personally didn't pick it up, but I didn't wish ill will towards the game or anything like that. I really want fans to enjoy this just so that they can get the absolute best third installment that they can possibly get and not get anything that's scaled back, which we might now see given the results of the sales of Rebirth. Why put all of your manpower into a third game that might not do well, you know? So I don't think that we're not going to see the game. I think that we are going to see the third installment, but don't be surprised, in my opinion, if you see the production value scaled back. Also, Final Fantasy 16 and 15 and 14 and 13 and 12 and 11. So literally all those games are equally not great decisions on behalf of Square Enix. I know that this is probably like the most like controversial take that I have here. Here's the thing, okay? There is going to be hardcore Square Enix fans, hardcore Final Fantasy fans that will always buy any one of these games, whether it's an MMO, whether it's an action RPG, whether it's just an open world game that's loosey-goosey. They will be there and they will find something to love about these games always. So there's a strong fan base there, very passionate. They will go up to bat for Square Enix time and time again. I'm going to see hate comments in this video just for bringing this topic up. But the truth of the matter is that there was a greatly established fan base from 7 and also just the hardcore both before that. And there are people that still play those games to this day or discovering them to this day, and they all agree that those games are timeless. Final Fantasy 13 is not timeless. You're not going to find people actively seeking out Final Fantasy 13. It is 7, 9, and 6, sometimes 8, a lot of times 10, and they all have something in common. They are all turn-based RPGs. So if Square Enix really wants to knock it out of the park for their next Final Fantasy game, my recommendation is innovate through the essentials. And the essentials, in my opinion, are turn-based combat as well as open world exploration. Now, open world exploration can be something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but it could also just be that you're on a map and you're walking around on the map. This is a level of immersion that people at Square Enix has abandoned a long time ago, and they need to bring that back. That was a huge appeal even to the older games. Somehow, some way, your oversized character walking on this map that represents an entire world is infinitely more immersive than picking an area or a zone off of a cursor. You know, like, there's a huge difference there. It's funny because they tried to excel the quality of Final Fantasy in so many different ways, like the voice acting, the level of detail to the graphics and stuff like that. They keep forgetting the core fundamentals of Final Fantasy. And I do think that if they went back to it, they would see the same sort of success that we just saw with Baldur's Gate 3, where that game has no right to be as successful as it is in the eyes of something like Square Enix, because it's just taking a sequel off of a really old, dead franchise. Only 2 games exist to its name in the mainline franchise, and all they did was just go back to the original gameplay but make it better and more expansive. And guess what? It got Game of the Year, and it got to be one of the best-selling games of that year. And it's just for the most part, top-down RPG game with turn-based combat. Square Enix, just, if you want to look to imitate something, to imitate Baldur's Gate 3, and just look at it and say, like, wow, like, just going back to its roots and just trying to make it as strong as possible really did numbers for this franchise. We should do the same. So do that. Keep making remakes. I think that that's really awesome. Like Super Mario RPG was fantastic. Live Alive was a lot of fun. Star Ocean 2 was a great way to finally experience that game for the first time for me. And we want to see stuff like Chrono Trigger. We want to see that Dragon Quest 3 remake finally come out. Please finish that. I don't know what's going on there. I figured that would be a easy, small-scale project, and yet for some reason we're still here, like I think 2 or 3 years later, with nothing to show. It's so weird. So finish that game, and maybe start doing serious remakes of something like Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy IX. We'd be very excited for that. Or direct sequels to Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy IX. That would also be amazing. I would be very excited for that. All right. Well, anyways, I've talked enough. Thank you so much for listening, and take care.